Money FM 89.3, best of weekends.
We're going to stay in the U.S. here for a minute and talk about a follow-up to that historic election in Georgia. And the fact that two Democrats won, albeit very narrowly, which really switched the balance of power and the perception of not only what's happening in the state of Georgia, but obviously at the national level, giving the Biden administration that even split in the U.S. Senate, with the deciding vote going now to the Vice President-to-be, Kamala Harris. Joining us on the line right now to talk more about that is Maria Saporta, founder and executive editor of the Saporta Report in Atlanta, Georgia. Maria, a veteran journalist, formerly from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and others. Maria, great to have you on today. Welcome to Singapore.
Yeah, great to see you, Glenn.
It's been a crazy week, hasn't it?
Well, it's been a crazy last 12 months, I think, if we really want to get down to it. But this last week, just a week ago, it was revealed that Trump had this somewhat inappropriate telephone conversation with the Secretary of State of Georgia, where he was actually asking the Secretary of State to find 1,780 votes, just with a one vote margin to have made him win Georgia. The Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, did not go along with Trump's wishes.
Well, and for a couple of days, that was really the hot story until the hotter story surfaced just the other day in the Capitol. So eclipsing that and others. And I almost feel like the runoff election was eclipsed as well, because just the morning that all the announcements were being made is when everything was starting to happen on Capitol Hill. But take us back to that historic runoff election for both Republicans and Democrats in Georgia. First of all, were you surprised at the outcome that the Democrats were able to eke out a victory?
If I can rewind to the election, the November 3rd election, because for the first time since 1992, Georgia voted for the Democratic presidential nominee, and that Georgia's been going more and more solidly red since the early 90s. And this was the first real indication that it was beginning to turn blue. But there was a lot of, question and debate about whether that was a one-off situation. There had been evidence that certain people had split the ticket, voted against Donald Trump, but had voted for the Republican senatorial candidates. So no one really knew what was going to happen in the runoff. Usually in a runoff election in Georgia, it will favor the Republicans because for whatever reason, they would come out to vote more so than the Democrats. So nobody really knew what was going to happen. What made it so fascinating is the turnout that existed, that came out. There were slightly over 5 million people who voted in the general election, and about 4.5 million people came out to vote in the runoff.
Wow.
Usually it's about 10% of the general election.
Massive numbers, huh? Yeah.
And massive on both sides. And the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars were spent in Georgia by both parties for each of the candidates. It's felt like we were in the center of the balance of power. And it's been fascinating to watch. But the victories of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, the first Jew and the first African American to represent Georgia in the U.S. Senate, at least since Reconstruction, that has shown just that Democrats have really built quite a foundation and quite a base.
Maria, you're a native, of course. You have been covering politics as well as many other topics in Georgia all of your career. And you have seen the development of the political landscape. And in truth, it's Metro Atlanta, it's Columbus, and if you go onto the east side, if you look at out near on the coast, right, that are for the Democratic sort of centers. Is it? I know it's a little bit too early to say that Georgia is going to go Democrat because the margins are still very close, but there are huge swaths of of Georgia that are still very solidly red, albeit they may be rural areas. As you kind of look at the landscape and how it's changing, is it because of the ability to get the vote out that was already there, or is it because of actual demographics that are changing in the state? Maybe more people of color coming in, or is it just more people voting?
I think it's a combination of both. Definitely, Georgia's population is becoming much more diverse. There's actually a large influx of Asians and Hispanics, and also a growth in the African American population here. So that definitely contributes to Georgia becoming more blue. But also there was this massive voter registration drive with both parties. But Stacey Abrams has gotten really national, international recognition for doing through Fair Fight and other things to really register voters and then to get them out to vote. And I think we saw the results of that. Biden won Georgia by about 12,000 votes. But Raphael Warnock won by like 80,000 votes. And John Ossoff won by like 44,000. And they're still counting some absentee votes.
Yeah. And as you look at those two very historic wins, would you expect now people that perhaps may not have been as engaged in politics before would now maybe see the value in becoming more engaged in Georgia politics? Forever Atlanta was controlled by African Americans, local politics there, and the state politics was run by, mostly white Republicans, right? Do you think we'll see more of a shift around that as people get more active in voting within the state of Georgia?
It's already happening. There were several firsts of people who were voted into the state legislature. The big change that's happened is that the suburbs have become much more diverse and much more democratic. So Cobb County and Gwinnett County used to be bastions of the Republican Party, and both of them are now solidly Democrat. Gwinnett County and Cobb County elected their first African-American woman chairs of each county. So that's certainly changing. So the metro area has gotten more diverse. South Georgia, there are strong rural counties with primarily Black population, and they definitely came out to vote for this. So it's a fascinating time to be in Georgia because it feels like the world is changing, and it's much more balanced. For the last 20 years, almost 20 years, it's been pretty much a Republican-centered state.
Yeah.
And Atlanta being the Democratic bastion, now it's much more nuanced.
Yeah, of course, there's a long way to go before that actual shift can be confirmed, right? I mean, the margins are still very razor thin when you look at the overall picture. But it would be interesting if Georgia does become a state that the Democrats can reliably count on the electoral column for the national elections. What now? What do you think? How do you think Warnock and Ossoff will represent Georgia? What issues will they champion? What will be their agenda going in as freshman senators? Or do you have an idea yet?
Yeah, I mean, they were quite open about it during the campaign. Healthcare is really important, addressing the pandemic. I think that they're going to come kind of with a honeymoon with Biden as president and with the majority, however slim it is, in the U.S. Senate. I think there's talk of infrastructure bills that would be coming, probably of greatest interest to the Singapore audience, and I think you and Dane talked about this as well, is that the U.S. is going to become more international again, rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, looking at trade agreements, and building international alliances again, which under the America First policies of Donald Trump, we had pretty much let slide by.
Yeah. Of course, there are many Fortune 500 companies based in Georgia, and many Americans who have lived in Singapore have gone back to Atlanta or vice versa, joining those companies. So Georgia is a well-known state to many people in Singapore. The events of this past week on Capitol Hill, how have they resonated in the state of Georgia? Has there been any more or less resonance because of the election, the runoff election that you've just gone through, or has it just been as shocking to you guys as it has to everybody else?
Well, as you said, it totally overshadowed Warnock and John Ossoff. But you've seen the majority of Republicans really denounce what happened in Washington, D.C. There are a few congressmen from Georgia and one congresswoman who were part of the efforts to object to the votes that Georgia had passed. But I think that everyone is maybe somber and more careful about what their policies and their words are. I think we pretty much got a little too close to the fire on this one. And there's going to be some people stepping back. And the fact that you had Biden, Ossoff, and Warnock win. I think every Republican who is in a constitutional office in Georgia, and every constitutional officer is held by a white Republican male right now. I think all of them will be looking over their shoulder to see. We have now become much more of a competitive state. And I think the public wins in that situation.
Maria Saporta.
And press club and our debates win too. I remember fondly when you were president or head of the Atlanta Press Club, and we put on the only runoff debates for the U.S. Senate candidates.
Yep, and we were able to watch those debates here. I mean, they made the news here in Singapore as well. So the Atlanta Press Club standing up and standing out in those very important races. So, Maria, thanks for your time. Saporta, founder and executive editor of the Saporta Report in Atlanta, Georgia. Really appreciate your time.
Great to see you. Take care.